If I were to summarize the Star Citizen experience in one word, it would be friction. From UI to items and gameplay structure, the amount of friction in playing Star Citizen has and continues to be a major deterrent that keeps the game from reaching mainstream. Today, I want to talk about ways to mitigate friction from other games and look at how they could be implemented in a game like Star Citizen. We're going to look at three key areas, with those being UI, gameplay structure, and social features. Let's start with UI. From the first moment you wake up in the verse, you'll be using the F key a lot. If you don't know that the keybind to get out of bed is Y, then you can use F and your mouse to look around and click the exit bed option. However, how much can you really do while you're lying there in bed? It's unlikely that CIG is going to add any aerobic exercise options to bed gameplay, so there's really only two options here. You can exit the bed, or you can exit the game and log out. The question then is, do we need a keybind to exit the bed? Do we need to hold F to access these options? I posit that no, we don't need either of these. Star Citizen likes to have what are called diegetic interfaces. That is to say that menu options that would typically pull up in a dialog box in other games appear in the scene of your character. But here in bed, your field of view is limited, you have no movement options, and all the interactables around you are within this narrow window. If the options appeared in front of your face by default, without you needing to look for them and hold the F key, then it could be simplified that a simple F press or click would activate the option. This cuts down on the number of player actions required to do a task in-game, and will be a recurring theme throughout this video. The reason we're starting here is because this is the simplest scenario that Star Citizen has. So if there's inefficiencies here, then as we add on more mechanics, it snowballs into an exorbitant amount of wasted inputs and time. Minecraft also has bed mechanics. They serve a different function than in Star Citizen, but the concept is largely similar in that you'll be using a bed quite often, and you're likewise pretty limited therein. While sleeping in Minecraft, you can click the dialog option that appears to exit the bed, but you can also hit escape. So literally, to escape your bed, you can hit the escape key. In many games, jump has served as a quick option for exiting a vehicle or seat as a player-driven intuition. Functionally, by building on the player's intuition, developers provide multiple pathways to complete simple tasks. In Star Citizen, we see the same applied both in beds and non-operative seats. If you push forward while being in a seated position and you're not piloting something, your character will exit the seat. So what's the problem? It's slow. Star Citizen has some fantastic animations, but the speed at which they play is often agonizingly slow. With our simple seat scenario, it's slow enough that newer players don't realize they have triggered an animation and may get confused. Many games up until today have avoided this by simply not having an animation at all. You snap in and out of seats almost instantaneously. However, with modern games and modern compute power of each player, animations have become more common. Usually, the time required for them is kept low, and in many cases there is a distinctly shorter amount of time before you can perform your next input. So even while an animation is still playing, it doesn't really matter because you've already started the next action. When an animation is slow, it leads to players being unsure if their input has been received. This leads to duplicate inputs being sent, and in a game that already struggles with interaction delay, this can cause even further issues. The fix here is pretty simple. Speed it up. As I type this script, I'm not doing so at a cinematic pace. I'm doing it as quickly as I can. It doesn't hurt for my character to do the same. Think about when you step into your car. If you're like me, your foot lands on the brake the same time your butt hits the seat. You've done this action literally thousands of times, so it gets pretty efficient. In Star Citizen, however, your character will use each ladder rung every time, and they perform the startup sequence individually. In reality, you would probably do all this faster, such as using both hands to activate buttons, or swinging over the side of your ship. You wouldn't be worried about a cinematic feel to how you enter and exit your ship. So either faster animation speeds can be employed, or simply animations that progress faster altogether. A prime example of this is our brand new hangars. We use these all the time. Each time, regardless of the size of the ship, it will take the same amount of time and it is comically slow. However, it really doesn't have to be. I'll talk about a couple solutions here. The simplest would be to have the platform for your new ship appear at the height of the top of your ship's bounding box. For example, the Aegis Reclaimer has a max height of 60 meters. So if you were to spawn the Reclaimer, the platform would start 60 meters below the surface. But if you spawned a 100i in the same hangar with its height of 4 meters, then the platform would spawn 4 meters below the surface. In the current iteration, the Reclaimer and the 100i require the same amount of time to retrieve. With this simple change, the vertical travel of the 100i would be 15 times faster than the Reclaimer. Not a bad deal for people using starter ships, eh? This can be optimized further by employing a parabolic curve for the horizontal shutter doors of the hangar. This sounds more complicated than it is. If we take the Reclaimer and draw a parabola that covers all of its structure, then we get an opening pattern that achieves two things. By the time the horizontal shutters are fully opened, the ship has reached the top of its travel. The second thing this does is shorten the travel time to the minimum it can be without clipping through anything. With an animation like this that happens so often in the game, it's important to optimize it so that it doesn't become a pain point for players. The next slowdown happens while still in the hangar, and that is the exterior doors. They look cool, but they could be sped up, and I don't think anyone would complain. Now I want you to think about all the animations you'll encounter if your goal was to spawn in and do one mission in your Zeus. How much time are you spending in-game that you do not have any control over, yet still take quite a bit of time? Hint, it's a lot. For a game that works so hard to build up the immersion of its experience, these moments completely kill the flow. You're literally taking the player out of the game. So it's important that if you're going to take away control from the player, it's done thoughtfully and only for the briefest of moments. This extends to what in reality could be thought of as interactive loading screens. The idea of an expansive, playable universe is wonderful, but there are a number of sensible compromises that games have made in the past to minimize the pain of an expansive world. So let's talk about gameplay structure a bit. There's a lot of overlap here with UI, so there's going to be some similar ideas here as well. There's also some areas where UI could greatly help the experience in ways that as of yet do not exist. On our return trip to Obituary Station, we've got some cargo that we want to sell off. After landing and unloading the boxes, what's the next step? Well, we need to take an elevator to get to the internal spaceport, walk over to the commerce kiosks, and then sell off our cargo. This is about the same as arriving at a shipping port and then having to drive into town for the dock workers to take possession of your cargo. It doesn't make a lot of logistical sense, and it doesn't make for a great experience. It should also be noted that this is one of the faster versions of this pathway because we're in a station. On planetary landing zones, we add in more elevators, trains, and running. So let's keep in mind the gameplay reasons the landing zones exist. They are essentially hub worlds in the game. They are a location to meet NPCs, get special missions, equip your character, and complete tasks. They're only recently growing into the full extent of that definition, and with the instanced content being introduced at some point, there will be more to actually do at landing zones. but we can take a look at hub worlds in other games to make some important observations. Take Skyrim, for instance. Each city you go to serves this same role, and you'll find similar accommodations in each one. There's a blacksmith, shopkeeper, and various other purposeful NPCs to make sure the player has convenient access to the tools they need to keep progressing. When you set out on a mission, most of the time you'll be leaving these towns behind and venturing into the wilds where all the action is. We see this pattern repeated in just about every open world game in existence. The hub serves as a place to rearm and rest up, but you're not necessarily supposed to spend a ton of time there. So the game structures itself around the player's convenience. It's pretty common to see all the shops a player would be interested in occupy the same street close to the town entrance. In Star Citizen, the juxtaposition of our landing zones adds to the friction by increasing the time spent not playing the game. If you ask most people, I don't think they'll tell you about all the fun they had shopping for Cruise Lux and ammunition. They're going to talk about what happened out in the wilds when they were doing a mission or doing a cargo run. That's why, as beautiful as these landing zones are, in many cases, the best thing they can do is minimize their own impact. What would be faster, more fun, and frankly more realistic is to either have an app on your mobiGlas or a kiosk in your hangar. Oh wait, we already have a kiosk in the hangar. And this is one area where elements of the game were designed for how it worked at the time, but it doesn't fit with the current game now. Before, cargo appeared magically in your ship, and the lore was such that it was being loaded in your absence, so getting the player out of there avoids them seeing the boxes magically appearing. But now we do the loading ourselves from the freight elevator. So the boxes magically appear on the elevator off screen, raise up, and then we move them onto the ship. It's no longer necessary to have this man behind the curtain mechanic anymore. So moving a version of the admin kiosk into the functionality of the freight kiosk makes a lot more sense than our numerous trips back and forth to buy and sell goods. In fact, this could very well be something that fills in the time spent in quantum travel. Instead of just watching the paint streaks, you could be setting up a purchase order for your destination so that it will be queued up for you in your freight elevator. I can do this today with the Walmart and Costco app. Before I leave the house, I can add everything to a cart and have it ready for me before I leave. Then, when I get there, I simply load it in my car and take off. But in Star Citizen, the middle section of quantum travel will still be largely automated, even if the beginning has a minigame. So you really can't do much besides watch the paint streaks. Yeah, there'll be some engineering gameplay you could do, but that won't be all the time. So having something consistent, like setting up the next leg of your journey, would be perfect for this downtime while greatly improving efficiency as well. There's another element that ties into this: trains. Now, I'm an engineer. I like trains, but I don't like trains in Star Citizen. Why? Because I have to use them all the time. The recent move towards spawning in your hangar feels like a great time accelerator that I'd like to see continue. But it does have a problem. The game is currently built around the habs of a station, not the hangars. So even though hangar spawns feel like an awesome option, it doesn't actually help in many cases. For instance, when I spawn in wanting to go on any kind of mission, I still need to go to the Galleria or shopping district to get necessary supplies. Whether it's ammunition, med guns and pens, armor, or cargo, all of it is outside my reach from the hangar. So even with what I still think is a positive move, I still get stuck taking trains and elevators to properly equip my character. After initial spawn and getting my character equipped, the hangar spawn does work much better. At that point, any kit I need is likely in my station inventory from buying in bulk before, assuming I was smart enough to do that. All of this could be mitigated by having a shopping app on the mobiGlas, which is feeling like an increasing necessity as time goes on. But then the question is, why do the landing zones exist? What pulls players from the hangar to go visit these areas? Well, you'll still have mission givers, exclusive parts, faction contacts, and repair and upgrade centers. For instance, if I'm looking to work for Miles Eckhart, I still need to meet him in the bar. He's not going to come to my hangar after all. And in the more recent context of a Pyro Stanton universe, if there were a mission giver for Citizens for Pyro in a room on Orbituary Station, then I'd still need to seek them out to get my next mission and equip myself with faction gear that isn't sold in the more vanilla shops. as I get my rep up with this NPC, then their buddy might also reach out to me offering to modify my gear. I'd still need to go talk to them and physically hand them my armor or weapons. All this to say that the center of action in your game needs to be consistent with what the player can access from that center. If that center is going to be our hangars, then most functions need to be accessible from the hangar, and CIG needs to provide compelling gameplay reasons to get players to go elsewhere. Part of this was discussed in the last sitcon with instanced content in the landing zones. CIG talked about plans to add an underworld to Area 18 where you'd be able to do typical dungeon crawls. This is perfect in my mind because it provides a reason to visit Area 18 that adds value to my time instead of bleeding it away. Having missions that are completed at a landing zone adds value to the area that is unique to the location itself. Other mechanics, such as bounty hunting, could play a role here as well. Right now, the landing zone serves as an invincible shield to protect you from being hunted. But criminals don't deserve this kind of protection, and allowing bounty hunters to search for their quarry on foot keeps that chase alive. Now, at this point, there's probably a lot of people wanting to comment something to the effect of how I'm making the game too casual, or I'm removing the sim aspect of the game. Of all the things that we could simulate in a video game, why would we want to simulate an inefficient UI and poorly laid out infrastructure? Why are we making infrastructure that is less efficient than it is in reality? Nothing I've suggested removes a feature or ability from the player. All of it serves to make things faster, more efficient, and frankly, more realistic. Recently, there was a lot of drama between two camps pushing for what they called item insurance and the opposition that called it duping. To be very clear, I love both of these content creators, and I'm not trying to reignite any kind of drama, but this highlights an issue that does exist in Star Citizen, and it's what we've already been talking about. Friction. The Zeus has a fantastic interior and is well equipped to keep several full loadouts in stock at any time. But no one does this. Part of this is down to our ships being fragile and blowing up too often. We know CIG is moving towards disablement over destruction, so this aspect should improve. Another element is it takes too darn long to accomplish. There's plans to speed this along as well, so I know I'm not just up in the night here. If the ship has a suit locker, CIG has talked about making it a fast way to equip a full loadout. That would help a lot. I'd also like to see a fully fledged ship configurator Mobiglass app, where it's possible to save everything from ship components to suit loadouts within slots on the ship. I've created the following diagram as a possible layout, though I think CIG has plenty of talent that could create a better version. With the ship properly configured in the app, then it could also be possible to restock all of those items at the same time at cost by either restocking the ship, repairing it, or claiming it with the correct level of insurance. This could pull from matching items in your local inventory, buying those items from the local shops, or asking if you want to default to the closest equivalent available for more lucrative pieces. For instance, if someone takes the time to grind out a contested zone to get the bestest quantum drive, I don't think it makes sense that this rare item is endlessly replaceable with claims and repairs. With disablement being the norm, I'd be incentivized to get back to the location of my last death and loot my ship components back. Imagine filing an insurance claim for a one-of-a-kind car. You're not getting the car back. You might get a payout to get something similar, but the insurance company can't just blink another car into existence. The same should apply to rare items in games. With real progression and a continuing story, it might hurt to lose a rare piece. However, it's not going to be the only one you get, and there will be better things down the road, so you wouldn't be too broken up about losing it. The problem we face currently is Star Citizen players still live with a patch wipe mindset. There's not too much room to increase in power, and we're so likely to lose something that it becomes overly frustrating when it happens. Try to remember your first piece of armor in Skyrim. Were you still wearing it a couple levels later? Probably not. In the future, with crafting, base building, and true progression mechanics, Star Citizen should offer an expansive list of replacements for any item you're broken up about losing. Not to mention that there will be an equally extensive list of ways to get high-value items. Maybe you craft it yourself, buy it from someone that does, do the gameplay to earn it, but the list goes on. And this ties into the next part about social features, another area that is sorely needing help in Star Citizen. I was elated to see this as a focus in the most recent CitizenCon, and I'm hoping that this is something that can come quickly. It's largely down to in-game menus and getting existing features to work well. The problem is simple. How do you find other players with similar interests and intentions? Right now, the lion's share of the load is carried by organizations using third-party apps like Discord. But this doesn't allow for the level of granularity needed in a game like Star Citizen. For example, if you're unfortunate enough to not have completed Save Stanton Chapter 1, you're in a tough spot, especially as a new player. The vast majority of people you'll interact with have already done these missions and don't feel a particular desire to do them again. Finding enough players with enough firepower to do the Idris missions can be pretty painful. Star Citizen needs a solution that allows players to connect down to the specific mission they want to do. Destiny has something akin to this with the Fireteam Finder. CIG needs at least this level of functionality for social features to work well. I'm sure they're already aware of this. The SitCon presentation left me hopeful that they at least have the right goals in mind. I can't emphasize enough, though, how important these features are, especially if you're a solo player. Now, this part always gets a bizarre pushback whenever I mention it in videos, but this is not a game that can be played wholly alone. The majority of the time, sure, you can go off on your own and do your own thing. But this game is not, has never been, and will not be something where interaction with other players is entirely avoidable. We all share the same verse. You are going to run into other players, both for good and bad. Social features then focus on the good parts of player interaction. Things like a player marketplace, a robust chat system, a fireteam finder, org management tools, mission manager. All of this falls under the umbrella of social tools. I want to focus on the benefits of a fireteam finder and chat system from the perspective of a new player in particular. You've just done the tutorial missions, now what? Hopefully, there's a better level of onboarding in the future wherein the tutorial goes beyond just your first mission. At some point, though, you'll be wondering that question. Now what? As a new player, you're not part of any orgs or Discord servers with lists of people to show you the ropes. So it needs to come from the game first and foremost. When CIG implements their own version of a Fireteam Finder, then you could browse that list to see if anything piques your interest. This puts you in contact with people that you already know want to do the same thing you do. This effectively eliminates the need to ask in global chat if anyone is doing Save Stanton's Phase 3. It also makes it significantly easier to actually find people doing the right activity for you. If I ask every 5 minutes in global chat if anyone is doing Phase 3, first off, the odds of anyone answering my question goes down with my repeated messages. I've successfully annoyed the whole server, which does nothing to help me either, and I'm still relying on enough people being on my server and at their keyboard during the brief window my message is displayed. With the Fireteam Finder, however, my interest remains communicated until I take it down. There's no need for me to keep spamming global, and I'm much more likely to find people to help, especially if my entry is visible to players outside my local server. If there's 500 people on my server, but 5,000 people in my country playing, it's much more likely that I'll find a squad to play with if I ask the 5,000 than if I only ask the 500. Maybe even 1,500 if I server hop. With the recent introduction of Pyro, there's been a lot of salt over the fact that the best tippy top items are gated behind PvP activity. Now, first off, this isn't nearly as bad as people have made it sound. It's also pretty standard game structure, so it baffles me that it's even an issue. If you want the best item for X activity, go do that thing. It's also going to get much worse as time goes on if you're one of these people looking at this like it's a bad thing. Again, it's not. But I digress. As more gameplay loops get fleshed out, there's going to be rewards that are exclusive to each loop. If industrial ships favor thick shields over weaponry, it may be that the best shields come from grinding out industrial gameplay. If I'm a combat-oriented player, then I'll either need to go do that gameplay myself or work out a trade with an industrial-focused player. It may very well be that I have to work with other players for stuff because the time sink to earn it myself would be prohibitive. None of that is a bad thing. That's how you construct a working economy. I can't get everything on my own, so other players fill in the gaps where needed. Where CIG needs to facilitate this is in providing the tools to make these transactions easier. They're already possible, They're just very cumbersome. Having an in-game player marketplace goes a long way to solve this. I post an item for sale, someone buys it. Or I post a looking to buy entry and someone else can fulfill it for me if there's not already a listing that works for me. This is standard flair in any game that allows items to travel between players, and I can't wait to see it in Star Citizen. A robust chat system also helps players make and keep long-lasting connections. Right now, it's not easy to send messages to other players. There's no DMs to speak of, and so everything that's not a party chat goes into global chat. This is a horrible system, but we and the devs all know that already. If I want to let Slooty in on something I found, they need to be online and either in my party or on my server. But if I could just send him a DM, he can read it at any time whenever he next logs on. Same goes for that player looking for a group and spamming global chat. If I did in fact need a gunner, I could send a message to just them instead of further bothering everyone else in the global channel. Right now, if I want to recruit a new player to join our org, I need to hold their hand through a very obfuscated application process that actually has no bearing on gameplay. I can't join a server on an org mate, I can't see if any of them are online, so effectively it's meaningless in-game. But when this is properly implemented, the work of joining an org will actually have value because it will enrich my gameplay with friends to play with. Further interacting with these players also makes other parts of the game easier and more enjoyable. Being in contact with combat players, industrial players, and others that I like and get along with means we can help each other through the deficits of our respective paths. If I'm the combat player, I can help my org mate out by trading him better weapons and he gives me better shielding. Having the tools to do this in-game eliminates a lot of the friction that comes from needing to have Discord open and managing communications and logistics across two different applications. Even if the result is unchanged, having these tools in the game natively makes it much easier for new and old players alike. You'd be surprised how often I'm told that someone doesn't have Discord. Personally, I think they're likely lying and just don't want to deal with the hassle. But that's exactly my point. The benefits of using Discord are all features that should be in the game. So to recap, if CIG wants to cut down on friction, a number of their current plans will help. This includes the social features they talked about at CitCon, and I hope these at least include what I've outlined here. In addition to this, some restructuring about how and when we acquire items is definitely due. We can also simplify and streamline interactions to reduce the number of required inputs and time investment for animations. Additional mobiGlas apps to facilitate restocking, purchase orders, and loadout management would all work to minimize time spent in stocking and restocking. If they did all of this, I think the majority of Friction players' experience would go with it and the game would be a lot more fun, bugs notwithstanding. But ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have for you today. What are some of your personal pain points in Star Citizen, and what kinds of friction would you like to see reduced? As always, this is Oddjob Entertainment, signing off.